What is this? AJA 26? Is that what we're up to here?
I thought we were at 28. I think we have a script somewhere.
Script?
We should look at it.
26 on your script. Yep, we're 26. Cool.
26 it is. All right, so when you get a file from me that says AJA 28, just subtract 2.
Okay.
Try not to be confused.
I will rename. This is
Josh, I heard you on the Bike Rumor podcast. Yeah, I think that was the one. Listen to that show. There's a
recently? No, Bike. It was Bike Radar.
Bike Radar. Them. Well, they just promoted it or something. I get my daily rundown of cycling news in Feedly, and it showed up there in one of their articles. Oh, Josh Portner on the podcast. I'm like, oh, okay. So it was. They did release it late last month. I think is when they released it. So.
Oh, got it. Yeah. I wouldn't know.
It was
I go to extreme measures to not listen to myself. So.
Well, they recorded you on phone or something weird like that, or you were on some other type of device, I think.
CB radio?
Yeah, no, we did it with the normal setup, but I can't remember what software they used. And then, because we'd also recorded a backup to send, but yeah, I don't know how they mixed it.
Now, you listen to this show afterward, don't you?
No.
Like 2 or 3 times?
Me?
That's me.
Yeah, that's Hottie.
That's my obsession.
I always listen to this afterward. Am I the only one who listens to our show?
I listen to it. I listen to it twice sometimes. I'll listen to it on my cheap Bluetooth headphones because I want to know how the mix sounds there. And then I'll put it on in my car, too, and listen to some in there to see what the differences are. And if the problem with, today's listening habits is people find all manner of ways to listen to audio, right? They can just put their phone on the countertop and listen that way, or they can put it through a Bluetooth speaker in their house, or they've got it on their car stereo, or they're like me and we're, $5 Bluetooth, earbuds, and you're trying to mix for all circumstances, and it's no win. There's no winning in that at all.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Funny, I will tell you, I discovered my wife has this, like, cool old wooden bowl that looks like it's incredibly parabolic in its shape. And I found that you get it out and you just drop your phone in the bottom of it while you're listening to a podcast. It's like Bose speakers.
Oh, yeah.
That's
a good idea.
I was thinking about that and you put it in a box, you put it in a corner, you kind of play with the sound. I'm like, wow, that bowl looks like it would be a nice shape. It's like the back of the, who's the British company that makes the speakers that are like the, tall, like parabolic backs in wood. Oh, shit. Bowers and Wilkins. No, it's Bowers and Wilkins. It's the out of the UK.
Bang & Olufsen?
Anyway,
yeah.
It gave me the idea, and I drop it in there. Now I'm like, oh man, that sounds better than like a real radio. So maybe there's a product idea in there.
I think there is.
So
3D printed in Thai. Sell it for $1,000.
That's right. Oh, it would cost more than $1,000. Probably couldn't make it for $1,000.
Now, something I was wondering is, what if I got you to 3D print me some glasses frames? Would those be good? Or can you 3D print in titanium light enough, hollow enough that they would be comfortable to wear? Because I would love a 3D tie print.
Yeah, man, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, you could, but they would have to be. I think it would be counterintuitive. They would end up being like pretty chunky frames that were hollow and really thin walled. Like you could. I mean, maybe you could print them more wiry, but yeah, I'd have to put some thought into that because it's some things it does so well and other things that seem easy are so hard.
I'm just thinking that would be, if
that would be
you could
cool.
Scan the dimensions of my face and make some 3D glasses frame or some glasses frames that were specifically for me. They wouldn't need to be hinged because these are the things that I would wear just when I'm riding, right?
Yep.
And
that could be cool. You could do it like the old, what were the Oakley M frames?
M frames, yeah.
Still
the
like,
kind that Hincapie wore?
The
No, those
classic.
were-
No,
They didn't have
one that was like it was just a single piece and it had like the little kind of wings on the side, but no hinges or anything.
I've got a pair
Those are my
still.
favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are my favorite Oakleys ever.
I wore
Yeah.
those for years after they stopped making them because you could put a prescription lens in them,
Right.
Right.
right?
The
And-
lens within a lens thing that they did. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. And
Georgie
that's what-
wore the the M jacket or something like that. That's what those were called.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the M jacket.
Those are what I
And those
had.
had removable lenses too. They had little hinges on the side down the lower part of it, and they would hinge open, and you could pull the lenses out and put new ones
Now,
in. And,
those aren't the kind that I'm thinking about. The kind that Hincapie wore for a long
yeah.
time. There was no.
Yeah, that was the
hinge
M
to those
frame,
at
the
all.
one piece. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Anyhow,
And once you got the lens in, it just kind of needed to stay in. It was not an easy thing to remove. But they were light, they were comfortable if they fit your head, right? If they didn't fit your head, there was not a lot you could do about it. I'm just saying that would be an awesome SILCA premium product. It's 3D printed, custom for your face. I don't know if I need to come in and you scan my face. But then I got to work with my optometrist to make the lens so that it fits these frames that have been made for my face.
the industry
That's
on
interesting.
the optics side has moved to this. It's almost an ugly look. It is an ugly look, especially on the ladies. These massive lenses. They're like ski goggles almost.
Yeah, they are huge.
Everyone's
They cover half your
wearing these.
face.
Right. They go down to your mouth practically. The bottom of the lenses do. And for a women's like delicate face, smaller faces, it just covers up their whole head practically. It's like, wait, is there a person behind that, or am I looking at an alien? What's going on there?
Wow, we will be.
All of them
we
are
will be
following this
asking,
trend too.
We'll be asking actual
I
glasses
think the
questions.
big trend
soon.
I've noticed there too, like the new Oakleys, like was it the Citra or whatever? I think they're hideous, but everybody seems to be wearing them. But they're all like really simple curvatures. Like they're not, their whole thing for years was that like polaric ellipsoid, ellipsotic geometry, which I think when you look at what that is, you're like, oh my god, that totally makes sense. Like it's equal distance, like in all. Anywhere your eyeball looks at it, like you're essentially looking through it perpendicular to the to that location. And that's not cheap to tool or design or anything. And now, I mean, so many of them are. It is like a ski goggle. It's like just a cheap piece of polycarbonate that they are folding and snapping into a frame. I mean, and they're and of course they sell them for the same. But that's how it
Do
goes.
either of you wear sport glasses with a prescription?
I wear contacts.
Mm.
Yeah, I wear
See, I
contacts.
only need to wear glasses when I am looking at far away stuff, and so I wear prescription glasses. And the Oakleys that I wear are like a 7 or 8 year old design. I'm trying to remember. I think it's the half jacket was what it was called, and you can. I keep staying with it because you can get a prescription lens that will snap into it. Right, for these very sophisticated glasses, it's not as easy to do.
Yeah, what were these? These are what I wrote in on this morning. Was this the one you're talking about? Where it's got like the hinge that...
Yeah.
The ones that I have, I think those are they called those the jawbones originally, but they had to change the name because of a trademark issue.
Okay.
But yeah, I have those, and I like those a lot too. I wear those because those are the easiest that there have ever been to interchange lenses. You can have multiple lenses. I actually still do have a pair of those, and I got transition style lenses for them, and they're good for everything. I like them a lot.
That's nice.
But the ones that I'm talking about, they didn't even have a bottom half of the frame. It more you sort of cammed it in and then snapped it closed on just on the hinge side, if I remember right. Or no, it was on the you had to take off the nose soft silicone nose piece and then lever it closed. I mean, there was a little bit of a process to it, but you could at least do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
don't know. I like it. We should think about it because that's, eyewear is the most profitable of all categories. of anything. Next to software, we can tease you about that. But
right,
what's my next incremental unit cost? Nothing. But eyewear is pretty close. Like,
is it?
You know,
I wonder why Specialized then failed. I mean, they just pulled out of it. They had it, and then they dumped out of it. And I thought it was because maybe there just wasn't enough market there in cycling for them, or
I mean, I think the problem is all your money gets spent brand building and marketing, right? I mean, you look at it's like Red Bull, right? Red Bull is probably the most profitable product on earth, but like they, this is a 98 margin product, $4 for this can that cost us 12 cents, but but you're going to spend $1 per can in marketing, right? I don't know. That would be my guess, but
I do not know how much I would spend on a set of glasses that I knew were designed to fit me perfectly and also worked great with my prescription, but it would be a lot because I wear I've stopped thinking about how valuable things are at cost time and have started thinking more in terms of how often do I use these things? A comfortable pair of shoes, right? My Shimano S-Fire shoes, I would pay triple the price that I pay for them because they solved a problem that had ruined cycling for me, right? There was a couple of years where I could not ride for more than a couple hours without being in, agonizing foot pain. The Shimano Last worked great for me, and now that would be, I seriously would pay almost any amount of money for them. I would do the same thing for glasses because I wear them every day. If they didn't slide down my nose and I didn't notice them, and I could replace the prescription lenses, when they got scratched or, just on an annual basis, something that would last forever, basically. Oh man, I would love that. I would love a pair of glasses that just fit me, just perfectly, right? Fit my head with my nose, right?
That's the limiting factor, isn't it? The nose shape. So many different noses in the world.
If you're that's why you would need to custom print them. Is why because everyone's face is fully unique, right?
Most glasses I end up riding high up on my Croatian nose. They end up up here like there.
Where I have a very small, I end up looking into the bottom nose. Of the frame. It doesn't. It's a problem that plagues us both, but for opposite reasons, right? Yeah. There we go.
Interesting.
I just made you your next $1 billion, Josh.
Yeah.
I'll take 1%. Okay, just one.
Okay.
Don't.
Perfect.
Not asking for a lot. No. Just make me wealthy. We should make a show.
Just make me enough money to retire.
One of the questions
we have a show to
will actually be about glasses and marginal gains. So I didn't mean to get there, but
that's a hottie fanboy question.
Yeah. The hottie sneaks to the front question.
Well, you don't have to put me at the front.
Oh, wait.
It's up to you to organize the questions. You can put me at the bottom. It's fine. You always put me at this is not. The audience should know that even though my question comes first, it is not me who puts it up there. The man who assembles the script, the man in the middle, puts me up there. So
I just want to make you to be the bad guy. It's that easy. And only the YouTubers will know that. So Hottie, such a bad guy. Always just cut in line. All right. Should we, let's go ahead and I'm going to make a mark in my Audition recording so that I don't have all of this here, but we'll still be recording in Riverside. Can you start in Audacity and let's start a show?
The audio show.
Right.
The audio show.
Let's start the audio show.
Yep. Audio on.
And then we will continue, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, after with a little post-show bonus Q&A. How about that? Just an extra one.
Ooh.
Because we're super generous.
Sneaking one in. I like it.
And that one's for me. Hottie gets the first, I get the last.
I've got one down there I could ask him too after you think you're done. but it's one I've been holding on to since the beginning of the Formula One season, too.
I thought we already asked that one.
No, porpoising and aerodynamics and hop bifurcation, and I had all kinds of thoughts stirring in my head that I wanted Josh to sort out.
Oh, I would have put that in the actual show. I thought we
had
already
covered
that.
Long time. And now I think a lot of the race cars have figured it out, sort of, somehow. I think they've hacked it more than anything, but don't know that they've solved it permanently. But
well, let's go ahead and do this. I'm looking at this. I don't know how this is going to be super interesting for our listeners, but does anyone else have a hard stop? Because I got a hard stop at 2 p.m. Mountain Time.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I have an 3:30 my time. I'd like to be done by. That's an hour 10.
Okay, so an hour. Let's do this.
Okay, then.
Countdown?
Sure. Episode 80-something. Ask Josh anything at number
82.
26. Countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And, I have, speaking of script, on my side of the script, I have pared this thing down a little bit, so just to get us going a little faster. Okay. Here we go. This is the Marginal Gains podcast presented by SILCA, and this is the show that makes a big deal about the little things and how those little things can be a big deal. Like all of our episodes, we begin with the podcaster's roll call, the place in the show where we introduce ourselves so you can tell one voice from another. So, I am Michael Houghton, also known as Hottie.
And I'm Josh Portner from SILCA. A bit less boomy than Hottie, but trying to hold my own on the mic.
And succeeding gracefully as ever. And I'm Eldon Nelson. I'm also known as Fatty. I don't have any boom at all in my voice, although I do have a boom arm, and I have several broadcast mics, enough for each of our listeners.
That's right.
It's a problem.
That's right. Okay, we are also present, and we are all present and accounted for then. And we'd also like to thank Shimano for supporting the show. I hope you both saw that Shimano has added a third group set to its family of 12-speed road Di2. 105 has now joined the club. Like its siblings Durace and Ultegra, the new 105 has wireless shifters. There's a bit of a weight penalty compared to Durace and Ultegra, but you can get it at under 2 grand, that 105 group set. And for the first time, there are 105 wheels, carbon no less, in 2 depths, 32 and 46 millimeter. Check out the new 105 DO2 at bike.shimano.com.
This is episode 82 of Marginal Gains and another edition of the wildly popular Ask Josh Anything series. This is the 26th time we've attempted to stump Josh. I'm sure that we will. This time we're going to do it. By tradition, either Hottie or I cuts in line and asks the first question. This time, Hottie won the coin toss.
Yeah, I called heads, and the coin landed heads. So here we go. Sunglasses and marginal gains or marginal losses is the topic on order here. And it starts with a quick announcement. First of all, Marginal Gains listener and Cobble Classics champ Nicky Terpstra is retiring from road racing. He won our favorite races, or mine, or all of ours. Paris-Roubaix, and that was in 2014, and Tour of Flanders in 2018. That was a bit of a surprise for him in 2018, but nonetheless, there he was, crossing the line. This year, we saw the Dutchman racing stateside as well at the Leadville Trail 100 and at Steamboat Springs, and he indicated in his announcement that while he may be done with road racing, he plans to do more on the bike. Now, I was watching a behind-the-scenes special of that tour, the 2018 Tour of Flanders race, and in the closing kilometers, as Nicky was in the lead and making a solo dash for the line, the team car, and he was racing for Quick Step at the time, told Nicky over the radio to remove his sunglasses from the forward-facing vents in his helmet. Now, Nicky obliged. I don't know if he threw the glasses to a fan or what, but either way, he got them out of his helmet. Now, Josh, I'm sure you've tested this. So a couple of questions here. What kind of shapes should we be aiming for when it comes to our sunglasses? And that's when they're on our faces, right? And what are glasses in the helmet, stored in the helmet, costing us? And at what speed should we be ditching those shades from our helmet vents?
Oh, wow. That's like a seriously
7-part
loaded
question.
Yeah, it's like 7, 9, 11-part question. Yeah, I guess for starters, sunglasses, every time I've tested them in various ways, they're really personal and unique. And I think they're, everybody's face is shaped different. Like Fatty was saying earlier, like you've got different face shapes, you've got different helmet shapes, and then you've got different sunglass shapes and certainly different sunglass sizes. And then on top of that, we see pretty big differences depending on the rider's posture. Like if you're kind of upright, like on the tops, and your face is more kind of perpendicular to the airflow, sunglasses and big sunglasses can be quite helpful, because they're just taking, your face, which are in particular like around your eyes, not a very aerodynamic shape. And you're replacing it with a relatively smooth, flowy aerodynamic shape. But you definitely see, like, as the riders get into more aggressive positions, and particularly if you think of like, time trial positions where you've got low head, maybe you're looking down, sunglasses, and we see this with a lot of the helmets that have visors, the visor isn't always fast because it can take air from higher in the system and actually drive it downward. Like, so say air that ideally would kind of hit you like at the nose and go around your head and down your long, your streamlined helmet and over your back might, depending on the angle of your head, might now get driven downward into your chest, where it has nowhere to go, right? So you've got that like high pressure area under there. So it's really specific to athlete, to visor, to sunglass, to whoever it is. And certainly, I have tested for this. We've done it with athletes. We've done it with companies. We've done it with teams. The I guess orders of magnitude here, at the typical 50K an hour wind tunnel speed, you can be talking plus or minus a couple of watts. I'd say at the very high end, maybe 4 or 5 watts at that speed, which means, at the 20 mile an hour range, you're probably looking at, less than a watt, give or take. Now, the sunglasses in the helmet vent, that's an interesting one because, you're putting something that's, makes your face more aero, but in its own right isn't of particularly aero shape, not a great CD, and you're sticking it up in the helmet vents, which is something that most helmets are pretty aero and sculpted. So, you really can be costing yourself, probably another 3 to 5 watts at that 50K an hour speed by having it up in there. Now, I have not seen this clip that you're talking about, but I would bet they were more, they were thinking more about the helmet sponsor than they were about the aerodynamics of the situation, because that's how pro racing works.
Well, Wilfred Peters, who was at the wheel, he said no for aerodynamics. He told him. He said,
he does. Okay.
He told his co-pilot, tell him, get the glasses out for aerodynamics, and they.
Well, good for him.
Did the right thing.
A lot of these guys now know this stuff. It's just, I will say, it's not common to see them act on it, particularly in the heat of the moment. So, it's usually someone like me texting somebody who's in the car, going, "Tell them to tell." So maybe that happened too.
Sure.
But no, that's I'm not familiar with that clip, but that's an interesting one. And absolutely, it's there's nothing aero about sticking a non-aero optimized object in front of a relatively aerodynamically optimized object, right? It's just it's basic common sense, but from a rider's perspective, it's also a pretty convenient place to stick your glasses if you think you're going to need them again at some point. Mm-hmm. So did he, in the clip, does he toss them off, or does he put them back on his face?
You know what? They cut away. There's a shot of the team car talking to him, saying, "Hey, tell Nicky, take your glasses off aerodynamics." In the previous shot, you saw him with the glasses on, and the next time they cut back to him, the glasses were out of his helmet vent. So I don't know what he did with them, More than likely a fan got them because I didn't see the team car come up alongside him at that point. I think the team car may have been stuck behind a little bit as he was trying to break for the line. This was I think he was about 4 kilometers from the finish at this point when they told, and he was solo too, like he had no help, and they were worried about Mads Pedersen catching him because Mads had kind of brought back a little time. Mads was kind of dangling back there about 17 seconds behind. He closed at like 15. I think they were a little worried about him catching. So, Nicky, get rid of the glasses, and he did.
So what's the threshold where it starts to matter, right? I mean, when you're climbing, you're doing an epic climb, you're going slow enough that your wind resistance just is not going to really play in. At what speed does it start to make a meaningful difference?
That's always a hard one because it kind of depends like what the relative trade-off is. Like at some marginal gains level, it matters at all speeds.
Sure.
Assuming there's, like if you were to say like, oh, you can improve CD or CDA with no other consequences. Of course you do it because that 5 watts at 30 is less than a watt at 20, or whatever the math works out to be, and it's 0.05 watts at 12 miles an hour, right? But it's still something. But of course, in the real world, there's always some consequence or some trade-off, right? So it's like, well, there's added weight, or there's failing to think of other trade-offs other than weight. But
or you might want to put the glasses back on at some point, right? I mean, you want to have to descend later and put them back on, right?
Yeah. So, I would say, here, certainly at Pro Tour speeds, aero always matters. And, we've done a lot of work with looking at the aero to weight trade-off when climbing. And, the aero weight trade-off really, for most, fit riders, at the Pro Tour, it's actually a little steeper than for the rest of us. But for your average person, it's probably somewhere between 7 and 8%. For a pro, it's probably, 8+%, give or take, because, those guys are climbing at some pretty ridiculous speeds sometimes.
True.
And then we certainly get into our talk on the last episode about, mountain biking and some of the, like the Leadville climbs and things where you think like, oh, okay, this, these climbs are long and even for the pros, they're pretty slow, right? They're pretty low speed. Aero's really doing almost nothing for you there, compared to weight. But of course, then you have the offsetting, blazing fast, long downhill where, if you, can utilize the speed or hold the speed, then you can way more than make up for it. I think one of my favorite examples of that was working with Christian Armstrong for the Beijing Olympics, and there was this great downhill, and it was one of the things we're talking to her about optimizing for the front wheel, and she said, no, like I'm like the speed on this downhill because it's technical is limited by by handling. Like if we put a more aerodynamic wheel on the front and I can go a mile an hour faster, I won't go that mile an hour faster because I need to control my speed to stay upright. And you're like, oh, that's a beautiful example of where that aerodynamic benefit doesn't offset it, right? Because you can't take advantage of the aero on the downhill because it's too technical. So I would say for most of us on the road, it's probably in that 7-8% range. Off-road, it may actually be a little bit less steep than that because the speeds at baseline are a little bit slower due to surface. So,
by the way, folks, if you want to check out that video I was referencing, it's Flanders Classics Videos. It's on YouTube. They have a lot of great behind-the-scenes looks at these races from team cars and from the broadcast booths. And all the stuff that they don't show, like during the race, you can kind of follow the race blow by blow from this behind-the-scenes look, and they've got some great camera angles that you don't normally see. So really cool stuff. And go straight for the 2018 race because Nicky won, and that was great. It was cool to see him win that. Okay,
no doubt.
let's move on to another favorite topic, and that is tires. And this time it's tire temperature. And we do. Oh no, am I skipping ahead here, Fatty? I am.
You did.
You have the next question.
Me. You not only cut in line, but then you skipped me.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. I'm going to go make a sandwich.
You should. Just go away. I'll handle it all. I'll have the Nikki Terpster show going by the time you come back. So
the Hottie Fan Club episode.
Enough of my questions. Let's move on to my questions. Well played.
Thanks, Hottie. We have a great follow-up question from a recent Ask Josh Anything episode where we discussed Dan Bingham's... Sorry. Thanks, Hottie. We had a great follow-up question from our most recent AJA episode where we discussed Dan Bingham's new hour record. And this comes from Tim in the comment section of the Marginal Gains podcast.cc site. Here's what he asked. Josh said how impressed he was with Dan's negative split strategy. While it's obviously great from a psychological perspective, I can't help wondering if this strategy leaves the rider at a disadvantage from the perspective of physics. If the dominating factor in an hour record is air resistance, and this is nonlinear, then surely the most efficient way is to do the ride at exactly a consistent speed through the whole hour. Otherwise, you're going to spend some time going slower than your overall average speed and some time going faster. The problem is, though, that the effort that you put into going faster than your average speed will be more than the effort you save in the time you're going below your average speed. How much of a difference do you think that would make in terms of distance in an hour record? And do you think it is outweighed by the psychological benefits? I was intrigued by this question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Now you're making me wish I read the script ahead of time. I think the way you solve for this, would involve calculus, which people who know me know that I hate doing calculus, but I think this would be worth. I think the argument here is, are you using more overall kilojoules essentially? Because you're riding at higher velocities where, like we've talked about before, your power required to overcome aerodrag, rises at the cube of speed. Yeah, I think he's spot on. If we were to take, say, integrate the area under the curve, so to speak, I think we are probably looking at more kilojoules used here because of the time spent above is asymmetrically or nonlinearly more difficult than the time spent below. I would agree 100% that I think theoretically, being able to put your velocity 500 meters over the current hour record and then ride those laps super consistently, that is going to be the most efficient way to do it. In terms of kilojoules output. Yeah, no, this is a good question. Okay, this totally makes me want to go do some math. But I think it shows that what makes part of what we love so much about the hour record, right, is that there's so much more to it than just the pure math of it, right? Like if this was like a motorcycle rider and we said like this engine can only put out exactly this much horsepower, that would be the strategy, right? And the rider would have to maintain their tuck and have their throttle pegged the whole time. But because we have humans involved and, the physiology and just the mental pressure and the strain, like we've talked about in the hour record shows, it really isn't just making the power for that amount of time. It's making the power while handling the high G-forces of cornering, 280 degree corners like every 16 seconds, where your body's pulling like multiple G's being pushed downward. And I think the physiological and psychological benefits of, being able to come into the second half of that event kind of less abused, physiologically, are huge, but I really think that the primary benefit to negative splitting, well, I guess there's tons of benefits to it, but I think the primary one is mental, right? That you're coming into the second half and you're just not, yet completely frazzled and destroyed. Jens Voigt was here in Indy with us a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking at dinner about his hour record, and he said, it's like 10 minutes in, you just want to die. And, and I think it's true, right? And to the emotional strategy of negative splitting is like, you are allowing yourself to get to 35 minutes before you feel like you want to die, right? And that's huge. It's it's like we've all done, interval training, right? And you think of like the mind games that your mind plays on you in a 5-minute interval or a 10-minute interval, and then you extrapolate, expand that out over an hour. I mean, you can only imagine, right, how bad it gets. And so I think negative splitting, if I had to stack rank them, I would say it's a mental, emotional, strategic benefit above and beyond the others. And then past that, I think there is your back and neck and your general kind of level of pain. It's going to be a nice benefit for that as well. And I'd have to do the math to determine like what's the, doing it, assuming perfect repeated lap times versus a negative split strategy. Like what's the real difference in kilojoule terms? In terms of energy expended, it's probably not that much. But yeah, we have his lap split, so we could actually get in, like, work our way into a pretty accurate number there pretty quickly.
Well, the cool thing
we'll
is
do that, and
there's always another episode.
And report back.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, you gotta love the insightful comments and thoughts that our listeners bring to this show, because I had not considered Tim's point until I read that, and I was like, holy cow. Absolutely. Wind resistance above the average speed is going to have an outsized impact. That's incredible. Right. But also, the psychological piece of it, right? That you were spending less time in the darkness, right? With Tunnel vision, and your whole world is pain. And there's more than just psychological impact there. You are feeling it in a very physical way when you are at that, in that kind of pain. And that really is the value, at least that I see in this negative split approach.
Thinking about this too, as we're here, I would add to that, one of the biggest risks with these hour attempts, right? So, I think if the riders had, were allowed like power meters that they could watch, I think the hour record becomes a totally different event, right? Mm-hmm. And I personally, I think for the worse, right? Because I think this is part of what makes it so impressive.
Sure.
Is that they don't have that information, and all they're allowed to know is essentially lap time. But we just have to look back at like the Alex Dowsett attempt of whatever 6 months, 9 months ago now that was, and one of the biggest risks in an hour record is that if you just have to break your kind of anaerobic threshold for 30 seconds or a minute before you've essentially ruined the entire rest of the race, right? Like once those guys go and girls, once you push it past that line and you get into that like lactate, and again, not a exercise physiologist, but they get into that kind of lactate production place, you now cannot perform for the entire rest of that event. And so, it's one of the things we always look at in those attempts, and you can just see it clear as day, like, oh, wow, 10 or 20 laps in, that person, put down 3 laps in a row that were just too hard. And then from there, it's like the line just trends downward, that you will never get those lap times back. And I think that's the other real, hidden benefit of this negative split strategy is that, you're starting out a really safe distance physiologically from that threshold. You're essentially eliminating the risk that you're going to push it too hard for a lap or two. And the reality is a lap or two is quite literally all it takes to undo the entire rest of the event. So,
yeah,
kudos to Dan for, man, that guy just did it right.
Oh, yeah.
So impressive.
And Dan, if you're listening, help us with the math here. I know you listen, so what's the answer? Maybe we can just recruit an answer, Josh. We'll ask Dan. Phone in, call in.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I'm sure he knows the answer.
He knows the answer for sure. I'm sure he...
Save me the calculus, Dan.
Come on, Dan. We know you listen.
I want you to compare answers.
Oh, and by the way, Filippo Ganna has announced that he is going to go for the hour record October 8th in Switzerland. Sounds like the same track. So, Josh, it does sound like the altitude game, going to altitude game is slowing a bit here. Dan even mentioned that, after sussing it out and looking at it and looking at the controllables, he could more easily identify good windows in Switzerland, even though it's closer to sea level, than traveling all the way to a high level, a higher track, and hoping that he gets it right there. So he felt much more confident about Switzerland and about the weather there and about weather data and what he could rely on there by going to Switzerland. So, and that's where Filippo's going to make his attempt as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm excited.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Love the hour record. And all right, now I can take back over the show, I think, with my not my next question, but a listener question. And it concerns tire temperature. And we talked a little about tire temperature actually during the Leadville podcast, how Jeremiah likes to store his bike inside overnight to preserve his tire temperature in particular.
Very smart.
But I don't believe I've ever had an AJA without at least one question about tires, so why not? Let's get into it again.
Will. Yeah.
We never will, and neither should we. This is the point of contact between the road and you, folks, is your tires. This question was a text sent in by James. He asks, does ambient temperature significantly affect the stiffness of a tire? For example, would a 28 mil tire at 0 degrees Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit, be significantly stiffer than the same tire at 25 Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit, assuming both tires are inflated to the same pressure? It seems almost certain that temperature is going to affect the suppleness of a tire, which could be a good or a bad thing, depending on how much that suppleness changes over the course of a ride and in what direction. But can surface and air temperature change enough to make a real difference to ride quality?
It's a good and insightful question. And for me, the being able to read the question, it all hangs on the word significantly. Does ambient temperature significantly affect the stiffness of a tire? The short answer is yes, it definitely does affect it. The rubbers and plastics, essentially become harder when they're cold than, and they're softer when they're warm. The beauty of this, I guess, is that it typically, and I would say we have not studied this to any tremendous level, because there's never a way to make an advantage out of it, right? It's not like I can't run my athlete on a warmer road than the athletes that he's racing against. So, it's kind of like, everybody's tires get a little bit harder when they're cold, but it's a disadvantage, equal for everybody. You can play to it a little bit by tweaking your tire pressures. And I will say one of the things that we spend a lot of time with, and both Flanders and Roubaix are great examples of this, where, unlike Jeremiah, the pro tour guys can't all sleep with their bikes in the room. And so, a lot of Paris-Roubaix, it can be 0, 1, 2 degrees Celsius at 6 a.m. when the mechanics are out there getting all the bikes set up. And then, of course, by the time the race is really, you're halfway through the race in the middle of the day, you might be, 20 degrees Celsius or more. You have a pretty big swing in temperature from the time the bikes are prepped until the time that the racing is really kind of getting serious. So, the rule of thumb that we use, and it's simplest when we think of it in imperial measurement terms, is, you can expect 1 psi increase for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit increase in ambient temperature. So, if you're going from 32 to, 70, you're going to get a roughly 4 psi increase in pressure from that. And then you do generate heat in the tire from running on the road surface. And that often tends to be somewhere in the 3/4 to 1 degree or 1 psi range for most days. And if you're certain places like in the Middle East where the pavement temperatures are extremely hot, you might get 2 or 3 psi increase because, you might have surface temperatures somewhere in the, 130, 140 degree Fahrenheit range in some of those races. So the best way to leverage this, would be to kind of calculate your pressures up and down based on, like if you're keeping track of your tire pressures or you're using a calculator to get them and you say, oh, well, I know that, my optimal here is, 58 and 62 or whatever that number is, it definitely makes sense. If you show up to your event and, it's 30 degrees colder than normal, I would adjust those pressures down if we assume that, that it's going to warm up through the day. But this is also a place where having really fast, supple tires pays off again, because what's happening when the tire stiffens due to cold is, not that the nylon or the cotton in the casing, it's not changing at all due to temperature. It's all in the rubber. And really supple tires that are really fast just have less rubber in them. And so therefore they're kind of proportionally more at an advantage, say, than heavier tires that tend to have more rubber, or less supple tires that would have more rubber in them. So that's definitely one to think of too.
That kind of goes to the follow-up that I had on this is if you were doing a race or a ride where you can expect a large variance in temperature in the day, like, Hadi, you'll remember a few years ago, you and I did the Crusher and the Tusher together. There was an actual 50-degree variance in the day of the race, right? From the beginning of the day to when it got real hot and then it got real cold again. But, I mean, we went from, I think, 40 degrees to 95 degrees in that day, and then back down to even, to much colder. But how could this affect, is there a smart tire type or compound type to choose if you know that you're going to be in a day that has a big swing in temperature, something with more rubber or less rubber, for example? Is that even worth considering, or is that just small enough to set aside? I think it depends on the risk. I think it's certainly, I'll tell you that, something like a cotton cased tire with a rubber tread is going to be less affected than something like a fully molded, vulcanized tire with a lot of rubber in the sidewall. I would also say that more tires using more natural latex rubbers will be less affected than those using, cheaper, rubbers of the butyl family or right.
Things like that. So, there really would be an advantage here to, the kind of open tubular style or a lot of these modern super fast tubeless tires are, they're approaching or surpassing the sort of open, tubular cotton casing type tires, and they're doing it with incredibly high efficiency, high latex percentage rubber in the sidewall, but primarily they're getting there by having as little rubber as possible in the sidewall. And so, I think certainly for road racing, this is a little bit easier because I would say as always, pick the lightest, fastest tires that you can find that'll hold up to your event. Off-road, this gets a little bit trickier because, none of the off-road tires really go quite to those extremes. But I would certainly be looking for the lightest, supplest tire in whatever category you need that to be. And I say light because, most all tires are, give or take, kind of similar in their casings. And so the weight of the tire is largely coming from how much rubber is in it. And so, lighter tires for this reason tend to be faster, right? There's just less material to be affected by the hysteresis related losses. And that's not 100%, right? There are tires out there that are not the lightest, that are still roll pretty fast. And there are tires that are, let's think of the old Tufo tires is a great example. Like those were super light tires that were super high rolling resistance, because they were using all the wrong materials. So it's not a 100% one-to-one relationship, but, I'd say get on the websites, find the fastest rolling tires, in the category that you're looking for. And those are also going to be the ones that are least affected by temperature.
So Josh, best practices here for the regular racer, like for instance, Fatty and I at Leadville will see lows in the high 30s and daytime high of say 74, 75, somewhere in there. That's pretty warm for them. So pretty good swing there. Should Fatty be pumping up his tires inside his house? Say his house is at 74 degrees, or should he take the bike outside and pump it to whatever his desired temp is minus the temperature drop there? What are the best practices there?
That's a good one. Honestly, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Okay.
I guess the big question would be, what's the inside house temperature versus the expected temperature of the day? You're unless your house is at 72 and the day is at 72, you should always at least be considering some sort of calculation, one direction or the other. But
right.
As long as you're aware of it and making that calculation and understanding, any potential trade-off there, it all really works out to be kind of the same answer.
Yeah.
Okay, quick pause here. That microphone, Josh, is being thumped around pretty good.
I think the pop filter is bouncing into the mic itself.
Yeah.
Is that
or
possible?
Or it's just loose or something?
Because there is a bump.
Yeah, it's going once in a while. I just rock the desk and I can hear it thump around a little bit. So
I'll try
Sorry,
not
audience,
to touch the desk.
You're going to have to deal with that for a little bit. I'm not going to be able to get that out. It's okay. Okay. All right. So let's do the mid-roll here. Okay. Okay, Josh, thanks for all that. A little behind-the-scenes thing here, folks. Fatty, as we said, gathers the listener questions for these Ask Josh Anything episodes. And the one thing you might notice is the absence of any training or nutrition questions. Why is that, Fatty?
Because neither of us train. No. It's because, eating and drinking increases your rolling resistance and your frontal area, and Josh is opposed to both of those things. No. Okay, for reals. This is a show that sticks to tech and design, and we leave the training and nutrition to real experts and our new partner, the feed. In fact, the feed has its own version of Ask Josh Anything, kind of.
Yes, they do. If you have questions about how to fuel your race or training, the feed has experts on hand who can help figure that stuff out. What products you might want to try, how much you should be taking in. On the feed's website, over on the right side of their homepage, is a drop-down menu called Help and Live Chat. That is where you can ask your nutrition questions specific to your training and racing needs. Plus, the feed has a great number of articles called Feed Insiders, where feed-sponsored athletes share their fueling plans and strategies.
Yeah, the feed has an incredibly broad, deep array of nutrition and supplements and the information to back it up. Don't forget feed formulas. They are personalized daily supplements curated for you based on your needs as an athlete. They come in a nice, easy to remember, what day is it? What should I be taking? Little daily pouch. This is cool. The first time you order the feed formulas, you get 50% off. So be sure to check out feed formulas at thefeed.com.
All right, more tire and inflation talk here. In recent episodes, we had a brief aside about CO2 and a sealant and how they interact. And that got some of you thinking. This question came in by text. It says, I'd love to know if there's any data that says filling tubeless tires with compressed nitrogen rather than pumped environmental air will yield any tangible benefits. I know it should stay inflated longer thanks to the larger molecule, but I wonder if reduced oxidation would prolong the sealant life? Did that come up in the development of SILCA sealant?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. I think we covered this in one of the earlier episodes. With 82 episodes, I just have lost track of what we've talked about and when. But so interesting thing with the CO2 is that it works its way across the tire or a membrane, to be generic. Not because the molecule size is small, but because there's actually it is actually soluble within the rubber, and so it's kind of a cool process when you learn it. I mean, you think of the CO2 actually can kind of go into solution with the rubber on the one side of the tire and kind of work its way through and come out the other. So I think the mental model we all use here is it's, the rubber has pores in it, and, a nitrogen molecule of N2 is big enough that it can't go through those pores, and the CO2 molecule is small enough that it can. When it's actually it's a chemical problem, right? Which not a chemical engineer or a chemist by any means, and so I just find that to be fascinating. This gas goes into solution with this rubber, and then just due to there being a gradient, it's high on one side and low on the other, it works its way away from the high concentration towards the low concentration, like a chemistry mixing problem.
Osmosis,
Yeah. So I'll put that out there as just, I think that is super cool. Nitrogen in your tires will absolutely keep them inflated longer than room air, certainly longer than CO2. Interesting thing, if you think about it, another thought experiment, the air around us is a pretty high percentage of nitrogen. And so as your tires are, and then there's oxygen and CO2 and all sorts of other craziness in there. And if you think about it, every time you're pumping up your tires, you're adding more room air, but the air that's escaping the tire is mostly the molecules that work their way across, right? Like the oxygens and the CO2s. And so over time, if you measure it, the percentage of nitrogen in a tire will grow and grow and grow because you're always adding air with a certain, with a high percentage of nitrogen, and then everything else is leaving. Of course, the quickest way to get there is to just fill them with nitrogen in the first place. I will say that there's no other real benefit to nitrogen that I've ever seen. For a lot of these hour records and these other, crazy things, we do, and all the way back to Wiggins, we have used argon. And argon is also a noble gas, also a big molecule. But there is something about argon that, I didn't believe it for the first, I don't even know how many times we tested it, but it actually appears to yield a slight reduction in CRR when you use it in a tire, and I don't even pretend to understand why that is or would be.
How about heat?
But we've seen it consistently enough that we use it.
How about could it deal with heat better, the argon, or produce less of it?
Maybe. I'm sure we have a listener out there that probably knows way more about this than I could know. But yeah, there's something about it that it just works. And argon, quite frankly, it's pretty easy to come by. I always have about 18 giant 6-foot tall argon bottles in my building because the 3D printers use them and the laser welders use them. Yeah. Any welding shop will have a ton of argon, and it's not that expensive to come by. But yeah, there's some for lack of understanding, I'll call it magical property to argon that it works really, really well here. I will also add, early in the SILCA experiment, I thought, instead of selling CO2 cartridges, we should sell nitrogen cartridges. That's so much better. And of course, industrial, compressed gas companies make such a thing. And the thing that's such a shame because CO2 liquefies in the canister, your average CO2 cartridge is only about under about 750 psi, and it's liquid in there. And you can fill a 25, 28 millimeter tire with one cartridge. That same size, like 16 gram CO2 cartridge, if you fill it with nitrogen, the nitrogen won't go liquid. And as a result, you can get about a third as much gas in there at 2,000 psi as you have with CO2 at 750. And so we played around with it for a couple of months. We're like, well, this is kind of a pain. like, oh yeah, this is so much better, but you have to carry three canisters to fix your flat. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. And then of course you can't go to bigger cylinders, because at that pressure, the wall thickness of the cylinder has to be so high that, a nitrogen canister that would refill your 28 millimeter tire is probably going to weigh 5 pounds. And so we dropped it, but it, one of those frustrating little details, like if we could just get it liquid in there, it would change the game, but that's not how that works.
No, it couldn't happen yet. That was my question, well, why don't we go ahead and have those instead of the CO2 cans? I'm moving, we talked about this before, but I'm moving away from the whole CO2 and the adapters and so forth. I don't know, I have about 50% success rate anytime that I use a CO2 can. I am done with them.
Yeah. But argon.
Argon, yeah.
Let's put some argon in your tires for Leadville. That's what I say. Have you measured it, Josh? What's the data show on argon? What's it worth?
CRR? Something like, for an hour record attempt, it's probably worth about a watt.
Watt, okay.
So, it's way out there on the, the CRR is already, 5-6 decimal places out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's worth, I'll tell you, it's worth more than like ceramic wheel bearings in an hour record.
Well,
so it's not nothing, but it's also not huge.
All right,
you're up.
I'm up. Okay, make a note. I'm sorry. I was going to. I was looking for the phone number because I wanted to say for that person who is going to be able to tell us why argon is a good choice in the hour record, please text us or call us at the Marginal Gains hotline number. That is 317-34... Oh, I lost the phone number again. I had to scroll. I had to scroll to get back to my place.
There it is. 317-343-4506. It's right below the next question.
Yeah. For that person who does have additional detail, please let us know. 317-343-4506. Anyone can call, anyone can text, but we for sure want you, argon expert, to let us know.
Dan Bigham can use that number. Nikki Terpster can use that number. Anybody. You're all welcome. Give us your answers. And your questions. But your answers, too.
For sure. Yeah, we will take answers. We've got good informed questions here, too. So, guys, I follow a lot of kinds of cycling, but not really BMX. Maybe it's because I started riding late enough in life that the fast twitch, high risk nature of that is just kind of beyond me. So this question kind of surprised me. This came in as a text. As a shop mechanic who sells services, rides, and races many different categories of bikes, I see the trickling down of technology between them. Carbon, disc brakes, suspension, compliance, all of those. But my question is, why hasn't BMX racing picked up tubeless and lower tire pressure in the same way? I would think of any of them, lower pressure would be a real game changer. So I got to say, this seems like an obvious thing to me, but maybe there's something I'm missing. Are there, does tubeless not have, or does tubeless have some problem? Aren't there obvious benefits to BMX?
Well, go ahead, Fatty. Let's ask Fatty anything. What's your guess, and we'll compare it to Josh's note. Go ahead. What do you think it is? I have a guess too, but go ahead.
My guess is that they are cornering so hard, and they are hitting the ground. They are doing so many jumps that they would be pinch flatting and just, getting snake biting constantly with a lower pressure tire. But that would just be my guess.
Mine's similar. I think the impact would mean too many blow-offs off a tubeless tire. What do you think, Josh?
I am going to go in a totally different direction here, and I'd say I straight up know almost nothing about BMX. I've been fortunate enough to work with, we have Marion University here in town, and they have an incredible cycling program, a big piece of which is BMX. And as a result, we've actually had a couple of really top level, like pro BMX racers intern with us. So I will shout out to Johnny Vance, who worked with us for a summer, and he's, I think, currently on the pro circuit racing. He really helped give me some understanding there. And I think we helped, him with some understanding. I was shocked at how little Marginal Gains kind of thinking and tech focus was in the sport. Like Johnny put me in touch with one of the most famous top people in all of BMX, and we really had a great conversation. And he was like, "Wow, now I never really thought about chain friction. Like the races are so short. How much can it matter?" We had looked at tightening up the clothing for the team, like within the rules a couple of years back, and I think that was a really big advantage for them. But I can't, nobody really believed it, right? Like, oh, they're not winning because you guys made the clothes a little bit more aero, but they weren't. that was paying some factor, right, against Marginal Gains thinking, yeah, they're not winning because of that, but yeah, if that's helping them that 1%, or it's helping push the odds in their favor, I think the real answer here is that the riders aren't demanding it, and the industry isn't pushing it. And I think, for all the people on the internet forums, complaining about how the industry is, pushes technology nobody wants onto the riders, it's the disc versus rim brake thing that we've had for 10 years. You can stir up 100 comments in 5 minutes on Reddit by coming up with some, rim versus disc brake, argument. And one of the things I see a lot is like, oh, the industry's pushing this. They're making us change because they need to sell bikes and all this stuff. The BMX side of the market is quite small with relatively few players. And I think those players tend to be somewhat, I would say, maybe more risk averse, and certainly less well funded than a lot of the big brands in the other side of the sport. And I think they are just slower to push technology out. And I think as a result too, you've got the BMX racers who are, predominantly kids, and really you go to a BMX race and it's really amazing. I mean, like the amount, it's all these families there, so many of them in RVs. I mean, it's just this, these really cool, giant, like parties, right? And, I think there's probably a little bit more of a focus on being cost conscious, not making the parents, buy a new bike every year or whatever, not pushing the parents to adopt technologies that they're not asking for. I think all of those things come into play. I would say, I think tubeless and better tire pressure, without a doubt, is going to play a role in improving things in BMX. And I think, you have high cornering speeds, but those are possible because of the corner banking. And so it's not like there's extreme, lateral, like side force wanting to tear tires off, I would argue there's nothing in BMX that's in terms of load or impact that's more extreme than anything in downhill. Right. And tubeless dominates downhill. So I don't think there's any good technical reason we're there other than the fact that there aren't tubeless rims and tires for BMX bikes.
So it's not a technical reason, it's more of a cultural reason, and something that will probably take a little bit longer, but almost certainly will get there. is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think you get there eventually, and I think partly you get there eventually because of the way the broader industry moves. And
right.
There will be a day where the Kendas and the Maxxis and the Continentals of the world are not hardly making any tube type tires anymore. Mm-hmm. And at some point there's like enough inertia within a company that somebody's going to look at it and go, "Oh my God, why are we still making why are we making this old technology in this one category?" And it's going to swing the pendulum on that category. And it's I mean, you look at like the automotive categories, right? I mean, there's no real, you couldn't buy a car with tube tires if you wanted to buy a car with tube tires. Right. Like at some point, it's just like, yep, nope, we're not going to make those anymore for supply chain and logistics and whatever other reasons, and we're done. Yeah. And so it's coming. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Heck, I have no idea. But it will happen.
Right.
All right, on to some bigger wheels, and this question is coming to us via text. Our text number, by the way, is the same as our voicemail number, 317-343-4506. Cyclocross is coming. Any thoughts for marginal gains in cyclocross? What are the impacts of miserable wheel-sucking mud on optimal tire pressure? Any proven methods to keep mud from clinging to a bike or rider? Are beer bellies more aero than flat bellies? Are all these cyclocross questions we have today? This listener didn't leave his name, probably for good reason, but we'll call him Racer X.
there was some good comedy in this question, and I wanted to include it for that reason, but also I think that it is a great question. What are the marginal gains available to a discipline that sort of intentionally avoids a lot of the marginal gains that you would normally see? I mean, you see pretty much all cross riders in skin suits, but other than that,
well, tire pressure is a big deal in cyclocross. Like nailing that can make or break a cyclocross race, season, everything. So tire pressure, I would say, would be your chief marginal gain in cyclocross. Now, how about mud, though, Josh? How does mud and those nasty conditions, I mean, how do you optimize for that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you think of the mud and sand both are just such great surfaces to think about because those are the two surfaces, well, soft mud, I should say, and sand. Those are the two surfaces that really take tire, like the optimization problem, and turn it into a max-min sort of a problem. Like if you're on sand or you're on mud, the tire pressure you want to run suddenly becomes the lowest possible tire pressure you can run. And that's where I think you get these really, I think, still valid rules of thumb. Like, you want a tire pressure that you're bottoming out once a lap on a course, right? That's telling you that like you were at the absolute, you're at the Icarus limit of like how, flying close to the sea, right? The answer, or I guess the reason behind that's pretty cool. If you think about it, sand is in a particular, sand is like a 100% hysteresis surface. You step on it, you sink, it does not come back at all. It's like 100. So, the thing you're trying to do by optimizing tire pressure is make the tire, have slightly less hysteresis. Well, when you're trying to change the hysteresis by a couple % one way or the other, and then all of a sudden you're running in a surface that's at 100% as bad as it can get. Well, hell, what's 10%, right? What's 15%, in the tire, where you can spread that load out and reduce the amount of, 100% hysteresis in the system. And so, those actually become really fun kind of, optimization, math problems, right? As we look at that, and mud, there's definitely a difference between, kind of thinner, stiffer mud and deep, sloppy mud. Deep, sloppy mud, treat it like sand. Thinner mud that's not quite as soft, you may actually want to go a little bit higher in pressure to keep the tire shape such that the knobs are giving you a little bit better bite. So yeah, that's how we tend to optimize. But I think the old, bottoming out once per lap, not hard, is a great rule of thumb, right? Because it's like, okay, you are right on the limit. Hopefully, pay good attention to that place where you're bottoming out, and do your best to not bottom it out there. But I think that's a good one to say, like, you're as close to the sea as you're going to be. The mud clinging, shedding mud question is I think a really fun one. For one, on that wax chain, right? And Hottie, I know you're take your chain to Hottie's chain spa because it just that wax chain just sheds the mud better than any other type of lubricant, and a lot of that comes from the fact that the mud is sticking to the wax on the outside of the chain, but the chain is shedding that outer wax coating as you ride. Mm-hmm. And so I would say I've seen incredibly muddy, sloppy cyclocross races where and we've even got some pictures, I think, from reviews and stuff customers have sent in. But you look at these bikes and it's like half inch of mud over the whole thing, and yet the chain actually looks like relatively clean. And that's just that. That wax shedding takes the mud with it. So, that's certainly there. There's, in the old days, we used to use PAM, the kitchen spray on things. Yeah. And that actually works remarkably well. But I will say, and Michelle's going to kill me because I'm going to totally out something here, but there are certain ceramic waxes and things that are incredibly amazing and that we've been working with. Actually getting close to, don't smack me, Michelle, getting close to having a product around that just like waxing a car, but you can wax the bike, and it you have to see it to believe it. I'll just say that.
Okay.
And you can there's some pretty remarkable technologies out there that do some things with both sealing up the paint and creating a slick surface, but also with changing the surface tension of the mud and the slop, that you kind of get this self-shedding effect. That's really cool. So, but in the meantime, until a product like that actually exists, PAM kitchen spray is really not a bad alternative, I will tell you.
Suddenly, every listener in the Northeast and the Northwest, their ears just perked up, I think, Fatty. So what about beer bellies, John? I know it's kind of a funny one, but a little more area, not such a good idea. But what if you could shape your beer belly properly? I mean, maybe we have something.
I'm going to go with beer bellies are more aero.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go with and I'm going to go with beer bellies are more aero because I've done a lot of work with really skinny Euro pros looking at like the Camelback on the front, back when that was like a thing, and it pretty much worked every time.
A Camelback on the front of their body, you're saying?
Camel front.
Yeah.
Camel front,
yeah.
right.
And udder.
It has been done and was banned.
Unsurprisingly.
But unsurprisingly. But it doesn't look good. It doesn't look as good as a beer belly, I'll say. I'll say that. But it's more aero for sure, and it makes sense.
Fill your Camelback with beer and put it on the front. Is that how I understand it? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And race your
Camel
cyclocross.
front.
Yeah, love that.
I did not expect this question to go in this direction. I love it. I love it. What a fantastic set of questions this episode. Oh man, terrific.
These were some really good ones. Well done, Marginal Gains listeners.
We gotta love our listeners. Please keep those questions coming. And that goes to you, Hottie.
Oh, sorry about that. And here's how you can do it. Leave a comment on this or any episode at marginalgainspodcast.cc. You can call or text the Marginal Gains hotline. This is the phone number we've already said. We're going to say it again. It's 317-343-4506. Again, 317-343-4506.
We are contractually obligated to say our phone number at least 6 times during each episode. I don't know. So, the fact that you are listening to this episode right now means you have found us on at least one platform. But if you're looking for others, you will see links at marginalgainspodcast.cc. And you probably noted that that website is a terrific place for you to leave a question for a future episode of the show.
And I will save everybody one more listing off of the telephone number and say we will be back soon with more questions that you desperately need answers to, if only you had thought to ask them.
All right.
Okay.
Bonus question? Should we do a bonus question? For the
Why not?
YouTubers?
You promised it.
For the YouTube.
You deliver.
Yeah,
I did. Okay, so one more question, and is kind of near and dear to my heart. I'll let you decide why. Kelly Eicher, Aicher, asked this in the comment section of marginalgainspodcast.cc. He says, I'm a bit of a techie nerd, but a slow rider. I enjoy all the gear. Recently waxed my chains with SILCA wax for the first time in over 20 years, just because I wanted to experiment with the option. My question is, with all the advances in wheel aerodynamics, tire technology, weight reduction, are there really any marginal gains for us slowpokes? 13 to 14 miles an hour average, maybe 150 to 108 watts. People like us, do marginal gains matter to the slowpoke?
Wow, that's yes, just less notable or noticeable, I would say. Right? It's you're it's still there. It's just of a much lower magnitude than it is for the faster guys. I will say, as a slowpoke, the biggest thing I notice, when you're out riding by yourself, these things can be really hard to notice, right? I mean, like we've talked about, we're just not wired to perceive speed all that well. Our minds trick us, the placebo, the no-see, all the stuff that we've talked about before. But where I really notice it, and I essentially have 2 bikes, a modern bike and a super old school bike, is like if you do end up, kind of like getting rolled up upon by like the fast group ride, like if I try to hang in with the fast group ride, there is no way in hell I can do it, 22 miles an hour or whatever, on my slow bike. I just don't have the power to do it. And yet if I'm on my fast bike, it hurts, but it's possible. So I would put that there. Are you really going to notice a 1/10 of a mile per hour gain due to all these things? From 14 to 14.1. No, it's there. If you ride that loop 100 times, you can probably see in your Strava or whatever, a little bit of a shift there. If you were to aero wheels versus non-aero wheels. You can still find that in the data. It's just not at a level where your brain is getting all excited and going, oh my God, this is amazing. Because it's 0.1 or 0.2 miles per hour difference.
Well, Mrs. Hottie, not a fast rider. She has a wax chain, and when I put that chain on, she noticed. Like right away, she's like, wow, this is great.
That I will say that's a good point. It's like really supple tires, right?
Yeah.
Like they just feel good. Wax chain feels good
and sounds good,
and the sound,
yeah,
right. The silence. I mean, that you can just hop on and I commute most days. Actually, I have my commuter bike right here, and I have my chain in the Instant Pot. I'm about to put it on when this episode is done, and when I ride home this evening, it's just there's always that moment of like, oh yeah, I just waxed my chain. Oh man, that's so good.
and I guess that's sort of the dividing line between where marginal gains aren't marginal at all and then the truly marginal gains, right? It's getting your tire pressure, getting nice tires, getting a chain that is well lubed. Those you can actually feel. And by feel, I mean you can actually feel, in how it vibrates up your spine, right? A really rough tire, a really overinflated tire, you can feel, and it's no good. a really noisy chain will ruin the very best bike ride in the world, right? We have all been there.
That is so true.
And at that point, yeah, these little differences aren't marginal at all. They affect you physically. They affect your I guess your experience, the sound and the sights of everything. And so, yeah, sometimes marginal gains are major gains, and it's just, getting those in there. And plus, and I think Kelly actually kind of nailed it. This was an excerpt from a longer message, but he was noting that, he has been in the industry for a long time, and that he just has a lot of fun doing this, that he enjoys the technology, he enjoys it. And I think that is a merit of its own that is worth considering. Are you having fun? Are you learning? Are you doing something new? Are you making someone else's ride? I know Hadi with his chain spa, it is not mostly just his chain that he is, that he is making serious improvements on. He's doing this for other racers in his community, and that is pretty cool, right? So yeah, it's the experience is kind of a major deal sometimes.
That's funny. And I will admit, I think like Hadi, I have offered to wax other people's chains just because I can't handle the sound.
Right.
For your own sanity.
Hey, how about you let me wax that chain for you? Wouldn't that be great?
Come on over.
For you? Yeah. You just drop that off and I'll take care of it because I am about to scream.
Love it. All right. Good
awesome
bonus question.
Awesome.
Thanks for submitting that, Kelly. Oh, man. We have so much. We could do another episode back to back, but I think that's going to do it for this episode.
Yeah, look at all the additional questions going on.
Oh, yeah. This wasn't even all of them. This is just the pool that I was drawing from, and that I was like, okay, these made the cut. We could do it. We could do another episode right now if we felt like it. But we will soon. We will soon.